Imagine a night when sirens scream across cities, families run for shelter, and the sky above is lit with streaks of fire. Tonight, Israel finds itself under heavy attack as rockets from Gaza escalate the crisis, and the entire region feels the tremors. Reports now suggest political pressure mounting on Egypt and other neighbors as tensions spread beyond borders. This isn't just another clash. This could reshape the Middle East. Stay with us because in this video we break down the timeline, the military impact, and the political storm shaking the region. And before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to USA Defense Daily and hit the bell icon so you never miss critical global defense updates. The escalation began with a sudden barrage of rockets fired from Gaza into southern and central Israel. Air raid sirens blared across cities, from Ashkelon to Tel Aviv, sending thousands of residents rushing into shelters. For families in these areas, the sound has become tragically familiar, but this wave felt different. Witnesses reported larger barrages, more frequent alarms, and explosions that lit up the night sky. Israel's Iron Dome defense system roared to life, interceptors streaking upward in arcs of light. Video footage circulating on social media showed dozens of interceptions within minutes. But even with the system's high success rate, some rockets slipped through, striking industrial zones and residential neighborhoods. Fires broke out and emergency crews scrambled to contain the damage. In Gaza, militant groups claimed responsibility for the strikes, declaring them a response to recent tensions in Jerusalem and military operations in the West Bank. Their statement described the attack as a show of defiance, a signal that Gaza would not remain silent. For Israel, the timing was alarming. The strikes came during a period of heightened political division, with leadership facing domestic criticism and international scrutiny. As the barrages continued, Israeli jets took to the skies. Reports describe precision strikes on launch sites, warehouses, and militant positions inside Gaza. The familiar cycle of escalation, rocket fire met with airstrikes, began to unfold once again. Civilians on both sides bore the brunt in Israel, families huddled underground in Gaza, families braced for the thunder of retaliatory strikes overhead. The psychological toll was immense. In Tel Aviv, commuters abandoned buses and sprinted for cover as alarms blared. In Gaza City, parents covered their children's ears as windows rattled from nearby explosions. For millions, the conflict was not an abstract headline. It was the reality outside their doors. But what made this escalation more significant was the regional context. Egypt, historically a mediator in conflicts between Israel and Gaza, now found itself under growing pressure. Political voices inside Cairo called for stronger responses, accusing Israel of destabilizing the region. While Egypt did not launch strikes, the rhetoric from Egyptian officials suggested a deepening frustration. Media in the Arab world amplified the narrative, framing the crisis as not just Israel versus Gaza, but as a test of regional balance. Analysts pointed out that this was the most intense round of rocket fire in months, possibly years. The sheer scale forced Israel to divert military assets, placing pressure on its defenses and political leadership. The Iron Dome, while effective, faced the limits of saturation. When hundreds of projectiles are launched in a short period, even the best systems cannot stop them all. International reactions poured in. Washington called for restraint while affirming Israel's right to defend itself. The European Union issued statements urging de-escalation, warning that further conflict could destabilize not only Gaza and Israel but the broader Middle East. The United Nations called for immediate ceasefire talks, signaling concern that humanitarian conditions could spiral. The escalation was not limited to rockets and airstrikes. In Jerusalem and the West Bank, tensions flared as protests erupted. Security forces clashed with demonstrators, adding another layer of volatility. Egypt's name surfaced repeatedly in news coverage, not as a direct participant in strikes, but as a potential flashpoint if the conflict widened. For years, Egypt has walked a careful line, maintaining peace agreements with Israel while also positioning itself as a supporter of Palestinian causes. The longer the crisis drags on, the more difficult that balance becomes. For ordinary people, the politics mattered less than survival. In Israel, families texted loved ones to confirm safety, children cried in shelters, and businesses shut down. In Gaza, residents crowded into darkened homes, fearful of airstrikes, with limited access to electricity and medical care. Aid groups warned that the humanitarian toll was rising with every passing hour. By the end of the first 24 hours, dozens of sites had been hit in Gaza, while Israel reported significant damage from rocket impacts. Both sides claimed success. Militants celebrated their ability to reach deeper into Israel, while Israeli leaders declared their airstrikes had weakened militant infrastructure. Yet beneath the claims, the reality was grim: lives lost, property destroyed, and a region sliding toward deeper instability. As the escalation deepened, the narrative shifted away from just the rockets in the sky to the much larger question: what does this mean for the region, and where is it all headed? Egypt suddenly found itself in the spotlight. For decades, Cairo has played the role of mediator between Israel and Palestinian groups. The historic Camp David Accords, signed in 1978, were the foundation of a peace agreement that made Egypt the first Arab country to officially recognize Israel. Since then, Egypt has carefully maintained a balancing act, protecting its peace treaty with Israel on one hand, and supporting the Palestinian cause in rhetoric on the other. This tightrope has been essential to its foreign policy. But every time rockets fly from Gaza into Israel, that tightrope becomes thinner. Egypt's leadership hears the anger of its citizens, who sympathize with the Palestinian struggle. At the same time, it faces international pressure to keep the peace. During this escalation, the criticism grew louder. Egyptian media channels debated the government's responsibility. Commentators asked, if Gaza is burning and Israel is under fire, how long can Cairo remain just a messenger of peace? In the Arab street, emotions were raw. Social media hashtags surged, calling for solidarity with Gaza and condemning Israel's airstrikes. Demonstrations appeared in Cairo, small but symbolic, demanding stronger action from the government. Opposition politicians seized the moment, arguing that Egypt should no longer be silent. Even though the Egyptian military did not take direct action, the perception of rising involvement was enough to send shivers through the region. Israel, meanwhile, found itself squeezed between two impossible pressures. On one side, citizens demanded protection. Families huddled in shelters, businesses disrupted, children unable to attend schools. They looked to the government and asked, how could this happen again? Where is our security? On the other side, international allies warned against heavy-handed responses. Washington sent private messages urging restraint. European officials expressed deep concern about the humanitarian fallout. Israel's leaders faced a grim reality. Too little action would look like weakness, but too much could spark a wildfire across the region. Netanyahu's government attempted to walk this line carefully. Airstrikes targeted militant positions, but press briefings emphasized precision and minimizing civilian harm. Diplomats worked overtime to explain Israel's position to skeptical audiences abroad. Yet domestic critics were unconvinced. Opposition leaders accused Netanyahu of indecision, pointing to the continuing barrages as proof that deterrence was broken. For ordinary Israelis, the reassurances did little to calm the fear of sirens blaring at any hour of the night. The humanitarian crisis worsened by the day. In Gaza, residential towers collapsed under bombardment. Hospitals ran short on supplies, their hallways crowded with the wounded. Aid workers described scenes of desperation. Families crammed into shelters with no electricity, children traumatized by the endless roar of jets overhead. For years, Gaza's infrastructure has been fragile, but this escalation pushed it to the edge. Reports emerged of neighborhoods without clean water for days. Food supplies dwindled as borders tightened. The United Nations warned of an impending humanitarian disaster unless aid corridors were opened. These images carried immense diplomatic weight. Television screens across Europe and the United States showed footage of crying children, burning streets, and crowded morgues. Politicians could not ignore the public outcry. In Washington, members of Congress clashed openly, some insisting on unconditional support for Israel, others demanding accountability and protection for Palestinian civilians. The debate was messy, but it highlighted a new reality. Global patience with endless escalation is wearing thin. At the same time, the economics of the conflict drew increasing attention. Analysts pointed out the staggering cost imbalance. Every Iron Dome interceptor launched to stop a 300 rocket cost tens of thousands of dollars. Some estimates put the ratio at 150, meaning the defender spends 50 times more than the attacker with each exchange. This asymmetry is not just a financial problem. It is a strategic one. Militants can claim victory even without overwhelming destruction, simply by draining Israel's resources and showing the world that its defenses are not flawless. This led to urgent discussions inside Israel about the future of its defense systems. Military engineers accelerated programs for laser weapons, which promised to intercept projectiles at far lower cost. dubbed the Iron Beam. These systems could one day fire beams of energy to destroy drones and rockets in the sky for a fraction of today's price. But such technology is still in development, years away from full deployment. Until then, Israel remains locked in a cycle where cheap rockets can force billion-dollar defenses to strain under pressure. Meanwhile, regional powers carefully position themselves. Iran was quick to highlight the escalation as proof that Israel's dominance could be challenged. Though Tehran denied direct involvement, intelligence officials suggested that technology or training from Iran may have played a role in Gaza's arsenal. For Iran, every rocket launched was a strategic message: Israel's fortress is not impenetrable. Turkey also raised its voice, framing itself as a defender of Palestinian rights. President Erdogan made fiery statements condemning Israel's actions, appealing to domestic audiences and regional allies. Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states faced quieter but equally complex dilemmas. Having pursued normalization with Israel in recent years, they now faced pressure from their own citizens to stand back or even reverse course. The escalation complicated fragile diplomatic progress, reminding everyone that in the Middle East, nothing is ever fully settled. International organizations scrambled to respond. The Arab League convened emergency meetings, issuing statements of solidarity with Gaza. The United Nations Security Council debated late into the night, but divisions among global powers prevented consensus on concrete action. Some countries called for immediate ceasefires, others blocked resolutions they saw as unfairly one-sided. The diplomatic theater mirrored the chaos on the ground: loud, urgent, but ultimately stuck in stalemate. Beyond politics and military tactics, the impact on ordinary lives remained the deepest tragedy. In Israel, psychologists reported surges in anxiety and trauma cases, especially among children. The constant alarms, sudden rushes to shelters, and nights spent underground took their toll. In Gaza, survival was the only priority. Families rationed food, shared scarce water, and prayed through the night that the next bomb would not fall on their roof. The human suffering transcended political arguments. As observers looked forward, scenarios ranged from cautious optimism to dire warnings. Best-case Egyptian mediators succeed in brokering a ceasefire, halting the immediate bloodshed and buying time for diplomacy. Worst-case escalation continues, drawing in more actors, perhaps skirmishes along the Lebanese border, unrest in the West Bank, or increased involvement of regional powers like Iran. Each scenario carried risks, and none offered true resolution. The deeper lesson was sobering. This conflict was not just about rockets and responses. It was about narratives, images, and psychology. Gaza's militants wanted to show they could defy Israel. Israel wanted to restore deterrence. Egypt wanted to prove its relevance as a mediator. And the world wanted to believe peace was still possible, even as each new explosion suggested otherwise. In the end, massive escalation described more than military activity. It captured the weight of uncertainty hanging over millions of lives. The rockets from Gaza shook Israel's sense of security. The airstrikes in Gaza deepened despair. Egypt's political balancing act revealed the fragility of regional stability. And the world realized once again that peace in the Middle East is never guaranteed, only pursued against impossible odds. The crisis continues, and the region watches with bated breath. Will diplomacy prevail, or will escalation drag everyone closer to the edge? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to USA Defense Daily for more analysis on global defense and security. Until next time, stay aware, stay informed, because in today's world, every second counts.